Hello, welcome to this session of Ignite Online, The Obituary, What is the Meaning of Life? This session was originally presented on October 17th, 2016. By now you've watched the video, What is the Meaning of Life, and completed your own obituary. Some of you probably had great difficulty doing this. It's not an easy thing to think about our own death, but it's important. As Catholics, we believe that this life is a training ground, a proving ground of sorts. It's the place where we choose our eternal destiny. So what is the meaning of life? Well, it's safe to say it's not this. This internet meme perfectly summarizes how most of the culture views the meaning of life. So let's look at this. The meaning of life is to be alive. It's so obvious and simple. Yet everyone rushes around in a panic as if we need to achieve something beyond ourselves. Well, now this is just silly. Look at the circular logic here. The meaning of life is to be alive. That doesn't go very far, does it? And it certainly doesn't square with our Catholic ideas about the purpose that God has for us in this world. So what is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. Pablo Picasso. Now we're getting a little closer. The meaning of life is to be ready to die. Blessed Miguel Pro was a priest during the persecution of Catholics in Mexico. Churches were closed and priests went into hiding. Father Miguel Pro conducted a secret ministry to the Mexican Catholics, bringing them to the sacraments and ministering to their spiritual and physical needs. Father Miguel was eventually betrayed to the police. He was sentenced to death without the benefit of any legal process. The Mexican government called photographers to his execution, expecting him to die as a coward. However, on the day of his execution, Father Miguel forgave his executioners, prayed, bravely refused the blindfold, and died proclaiming, "Viva Cristo Rey! Long live Christ the King!" Blessed Miguel Pro was ready to die because he had found his reason to live. He knew true happiness can only be found when we find our purpose. So, what is our purpose? Well, we might as well jump right into the deep end of the ocean. The Summa Theologica on the purpose of man. First of all, what's the Summa? Italian Dominican and theologian St. Thomas Aquinas was born in 1225 in Italy. Combining the theological principles of faith with the philosophical principles of reason, he was one of the most influential thinkers of medieval scholasticism. A prolific writer, Aquinas was granted the title Doctor of the Church. His greatest work, the Summa Theologica, was never completed. Tradition says that in 1273 St. Thomas was celebrating the Mass when he heard Christ speak to him. Christ asked him what he desired. Thomas replied, "Only you, Lord, only you." After this exchange, he abandoned his work. He was so impacted by this encounter with Christ that when he was asked to resume his work, Thomas replied, "I cannot, because all that I have written seems like straw to me." Thomas was so impacted, so affected by the personal presence of Christ, that he discovered the truth that all who grow close to Christ know. It's one thing to be able to know about him, to speak about him, to write about him. It's a whole nother thing to know him, to speak to him, to just be with him. And after encountering the personal God, Thomas lost all his zeal for everything that fell short of him. Thomas was a brilliant author, a great thinker, and a holy saint. What does his Summa tell us about our purpose? First, that we are ordered toward meaning and purpose. We have a will and a reason. The will seeks to achieve both its ends and the good, so that all acts being guided by the will are for a purpose. Simpler way to say this is that our will is looking always towards finding what is good for us, and that everything we do is leading us to finding our purpose. Second, a relationship with God is central to our purpose. The ultimate object of our will, the universal good, cannot be found in any creature, but rather only in God, who is the source of all good. So not only are we ordered toward meaning and purpose, we're programmed to find meaning and purpose in our life, but a relationship with God is the central part of our being. It's the paramount source of our purpose. If we're not in relationship with God, we're never going to find our purpose, because in the end, He is the object, the means, our heart's desire. He is our all, and He's the source of all of the good that we receive. Third, living our purpose makes us happy. Our final and complete happiness can consist only in contemplating God. As long as we desire and seek something else, we remain unhappy. So this is something that our world really needs to wrap its hands around, because everyone's running around trying to find happiness, and so many of us are looking in all the wrong places. Thomas writes that until we look towards God for our ultimate happiness, we're just going to continue to fill that hole with everything else, and it's never going to work because it's not what we're made for. Thomas also says that the material world exists to help us achieve our purpose. Happiness in this life, which is necessarily imperfect, requires the existence of the body and certain external goods. So God made this material world and everything in it to help us discover our purpose and achieve that purpose of union with Him and a life lived for Him in His service. So everything we see, the grass, the trees, the created sky, the beauty of the earth, all of the gifts we've been given in our life by God Himself, they exist so that we can care for them and be good stewards of them. But ultimately, their goal is to help us achieve our purpose of union with God. Living our purpose requires our active participation. One person can be happier than another insofar as he is better inclined to know, love, and serve God. Okay, so God might have made a world in which we were perfectly happy all the time and had to do nothing in order to obtain this happiness. But that's not real freedom, is it? And I'm not sure that it's real joy. Rather, God desired for us to have to participate in our purpose, in living and achieving our goals, so that we have that sense of accomplishment and we get happiness and joy from that. While all people in heaven are perfectly happy, perfectly content, and share perfectly for them in God's eternal beatitude, the degrees of happiness in heaven can be different. Think about it like a cup. You might have a cup that can hold 12 ounces of water, one that could hold 8, and one that can hold 4. You can fill every single cup to the top. Each cup is in itself perfectly full of the water. In our case, think about it like joy. If you could pour joy in a cup, each one would be filled perfectly with joy. And yet, the 12-ounce cup can just hold, objectively, much more than the 4-ounce cup. So Thomas makes the point that people are like this when it comes to God and to grace and to happiness. In heaven, there are those who are like the bigger cups. They can just hold more of God's presence, His life-giving love, His joy, than the smaller cups. How do we become a big cup or a small cup? Well, a lot of it has to do with how we live our lives on earth, how much we spiritually develop and grow in our relationship while here on this earth right now. The closer we draw to God, the more practice we become in prayer, the more we live to love and serve others, the bigger the cup gets, and the more objective joy we receive in heaven, though subjectively everyone's experience will be of perfect contentment. Wow, that was quite an introduction to the Summa Theologica, and there's heavy stuff in there. But it's important stuff. The Church echoes much of what St. Thomas wrote in her own teachings and documents. Now we're going to examine some of what the Church has written about meaning and purpose. Again, like Thomas, the Church echoes that our purpose is necessarily tied to relationship. A quote from Gaudium et Spes: "By his innermost nature, man is a social being, and unless he relates himself to others, he can neither live nor develop his potential." So our full achievement of our potential is dependent on being in relationship, not just with God, but with others. Our purpose is Christ-centered and revealed to us through the gospel. The gospel is precisely the definitive, superabundant answer to the questions that man asks himself about the meaning and purpose of his life. Fides et ratio. So this is a statement of great hope for us. We can discover our purpose because it's revealed to us in the Gospels. So by reading, studying, and praying on Scripture, we can understand more about what we're called to do, how we're called to live, and the people we're called to be. Not only can we do this, but the Church tells us we are morally obliged to seek our objective purpose. In the Decree on Religious Liberty, she writes, "All men should at once be impelled by nature and also bound by a moral obligation to seek the truth." In this case, the truth about what our purpose is, and, once discovered, we are morally obliged to live out our objective purpose. For all men are bound to adhere to the truth and to order their whole lives in accord with the demands of the truth. So not only are we built to seek the truth, not only is that truth going to be Christ-centered, but we're morally obliged to find our purpose and then to live it once we've discovered it. And in doing that, we become the very best version of ourselves. This is a mystery that's revealed to us in Scripture. In his letters to the Galatians, Paul writes, "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." By reason of this oneness, when we give ourselves to others, we give them Christ. As Christians, we are in Christ and Christ is in us. And so our relationships become a gospel message in a sense. We're bringing out the word of Christ to others. Christians do not simply imitate God in his loving self-giving, as it were, from the outside, reproducing the pattern revealed in Jesus Christ. But by grace, we are made participants in God's own act of self-giving love. And now we're coming to the point of it all. Now we're getting to the very heart of our purpose. Our purpose must be expressed as a total gift of self, self-donation. No one was able to understand and write about the concept of self-giving and self-donation like Pope St. John Paul II. In his work, Love and Responsibility, he speaks to purpose and self-donation. He writes that we are free to accept or reject our purpose once discovered. God allows man to learn his supernatural ends, but the decision to strive towards an end, the choice, of course, is left to man's free will. God does not redeem man against his will. And our purpose is love, the total gift of self. It makes it possible when we give ourselves to others to live love in the way that God lives it. For the capacity to love is determined by the fact that man is ready to seek the good consciously with others, to subordinate himself to this good because of others, or to subordinate himself to others because of this good. So breaking that down, how is it that we can love? What fact is it that makes it possible for us to love as God loves? It's because we're by nature programmed to look for the good of others, to give ourselves over to whatever this good is and serve others, and to receive whatever service they give to us in return in a relationship. So love, like our purpose, is always relational. It's impossible to say that love is something other than a relational thing. There's no objective object out there called love. Love is a gift. It's a complete and total giving of self. It's an action of the will, not a warm, fuzzy feeling. As every married couple who's been married a long time can tell you, love sometimes is a choice. Warm, fuzzy feelings can come and they can go, but when we act with our will for the objective good of the other, then we are loving. and that's our purpose. Wow, we waded into some deep water there. We looked at some great church documents and the writings of some very holy saints. But through it all, we discovered our purpose. We now know what our purpose is, but how do we live it? We live it when you become the best version of yourself. At this point in the sessions, the PowerPoint presentation was paused while participants answered discussion questions part 2 and watched the video, God's Miraculous Plan. Please pause this presentation, answer the discussion questions, watch the video, and then resume the presentation on the next slide. Thank you. We just watched a pretty incredible video about someone who overcame tremendous obstacles and challenges to really become the best version of himself. It's possible, but it's really hard to do. For the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to look at Matthew Kelly's book, The Rhythm of Life, because I think Kelly hits on a really important theme. We become the best version of ourselves when we find the intersection of the place where what we were born to do, our talents, what we're passionate about, our desires, and what we need to thrive, our genuine needs, come together. That's where you're going to find the best version of yourself. When that intersection is found, when you're doing the things that match your talents, your desires, and your needs, you're going to become a better person. You're going to start living your purpose. You're going to become the man or the woman God intends for you to be. Let's talk about how Matthew Kelly says we can get there. Fundamental to that journey, Matt Kelly says that there are 10 principles of excellence that once put into practice make us the best version of ourselves. These 10 principles develop the 4 aspects of the human person: mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical natures of the human person. Let's walk through each one of these 10 principles and look at them. First, the knowledge principle. Socrates says, know thyself. The knowledge principle says that we require self-assessment. What are my strengths? My weaknesses? Who am I? What is the relationship between my needs, desires, and talents? Wise people know themselves and live from that knowledge. If you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to become the best version of yourself. The dream principle. Life is a series of choices and decisions. How do you make your decision? From an infinite number of possibilities, your decisions determine your path. Do you consider your dreams when you're making decisions? Heroes, champions, leaders, and saints place no limits on their decision-making process. When faced with a choice, they ask, what would be best? What is the will of God? If I could do anything, what would I do? And they strive for the best. Now, I don't play golf. Frankly, I can't stand watching golf. But the third principle, the vision principle, is best summarized by some golf wisdom. If you can't see the shot, you can't hit the shot. An important part of becoming the best version of ourselves is to identify our goals and create realistic plans to achieve them. Specific plans. We need to be able to see what we're reaching towards in order to see the path that leads us there. Another piece of advice from Mr. Kelly about becoming the best version of ourselves is the life principle. He suggests that you develop a single sentence, phrase, or idea that summarizes the focus of your life. Keep that principle in your mind, not just in big decisions, but in the little choices you make each day. For example, maybe your life principle is I'm going to be a person of integrity, or honesty is always my best policy, or today I'm going to be the best father, the best husband I can be. Any of these life principles are the driving force behind every decision you make, whether it's a big decision about where to relocate or the little decision on how to spend the 20 extra money in your fund. Either way, you're always looking towards what your life principle is to help you make the right decisions. The thought principle is summarized in the statement, the first thoughts you have each day have the power to shape your whole day. What's the first thing you think when your alarm goes off in the morning? I'd venture to say for most of you it's, holy cow, I wish I could hit that snooze one more time. But you just started your day off on a real negative path. And on those days when you're tired and you're dragging yourself out of bed, don't you find that everything is a little more difficult? Maybe spend the first few moments of your day in quiet reflection and prayer. Ask yourself, what will it take for me today to be the better person that I can be? I think when we start our day with that, from there, everything will look a little bit different. And we shape the way our day goes, just by shaping the way we think about it. Those who practice the dedication principle know that love doesn't count the cost. Ask yourself, what are you willing to give yourself to completely and wholeheartedly? What are you willing to give yourself to absolutely and totally? Athletes who train for professional events or Olympic events spend hours upon hours upon hours training for their craft. An Olympic diver might make a dive 10,000 times before that one dive that lasts just a fraction of a second, which is the reason for the other 10,000. What is it that you're willing to give yourself completely to be so dedicated to you that it becomes your whole life's purpose? But more importantly, and Matt Kelly didn't touch on this, but I need to add this into this presentation, who are you willing to give yourself to without reservation? No greater love hath a man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. Whether it's your spouse, your children, your extended family, your friends, your coworkers, your community, who are you willing to give yourself to completely and hold nothing back in a total gift of self? Finally, there's this quote, in order to love what you do, you must do what you love. Find joy and love in everything you're doing, even the most mundane tasks, and living your purpose with dedication will get easier all the time. The belief principle summarizes a truth that we know unconsciously but don't often think about. We all live by faith whether we recognize it or not. Even hardened atheists who are sure there is no God live by faith every single day. None of us was alive to see Abraham Lincoln sworn in as the 16th President of the United States. Yet we trust that he was, because reputable people have shared that information with us over the years, and we believe them because they are trustworthy and it's rational. We all live by faith. Every day you have faith that when you take a step out of bed, the earth that has held you up all of these years is going to still hold you up, that you won't fall through it and pass into some abyss. That's a matter of faith as well. An extreme matter of faith, but a matter of faith. So, what are your beliefs? Do you believe in a God who loves you? Do you believe you are worthy of love? Do you believe God can make a difference in the world? Forget the world. What about in your family? In your heart? If you do have faith, if you do believe that God makes a real difference in your life every day and in the lives of others, then you have to live by the people principle. There's just no other way. God didn't intend for there to be. The people principle, people deserve to be cherished. People are meant to be loved. Things are meant to be used. But so often in our world, people are used and things are loved. The foundation of relationship is acceptance. Now, that doesn't mean we have to accept the wrong that's done We don't have to accept sinful behavior. We don't have to accept things that are hurtful and harmful. But we do accept a person as they are, just as God accepts us. And we work to forgive on a constant basis, to build those relationships, to keep communication healthy. How are you relating? How are you engaging others? When people see you, do they see Christ? Do they hear him when you speak? Do they see them in the activities that you're involved in? Now, don't get me wrong. You don't have to be constantly preaching like a minister or a person called to religious life. But even if you're just a dad or just a mom, and I use those terms really, well, let's just say this. I think there's no harder job in the world than to be a parent. But no matter what you do, when you're doing it with the love of God in your heart, when you're doing it in great faith, and you're treating people like they are the children of God who deserve to be cherished, people are going to see Jesus in you. They're going to want that. They're going to want to be like that. Pope John Paul summarized it perfectly. A person's rightful due is to be treated as an object of love, not an object for use. When we treat others as an object of love, they know it. They see it. When we're relating to people, we need to practice the communication principle. Be clear, concise, open, and honest. Remember that communication is an art. We need to work towards better communication all the time and practice it like great artists practice their work. Let others talk. Be more ready to compliment than criticize. Engage people where they are, but still hold up those ideals. And challenge people, but do so ever so gently. And the final principle, never give up. As St. Paul writes, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. You know, our life story might not look exactly the way we hoped it would. Maybe some things have gone a little awry. Maybe there were things that you wrote down in your obituary that made you cringe a little bit because you wish it was a little different. Some of those things can't be changed, and we leave them in God's hands, trusting in His grace and mercy. But some of those things can be changed, and it's not too late. At this point, participants in the session completed discussion questions part 3, and afterwards watched the video, The Movie by Catholics Come Home, as some inspiration for what we can become, to remind us our life story isn't written, our obituary isn't written yet, but it will be, and the only person that gets to decide what's on that piece of paper is you. Because the truth is, you're already writing your obituary every single day. With every decision, with every choice, with every action, you're writing your legacy. You're defining who you are and how you'll be remembered. Make it a good story.